these kind of buzzwords there. And increasingly, when we talk to customers, we start to kind of actually level down into the reality of these situations. And one of the terms that our CTO uses that I really think coins the conversation best is that the cloud is not for every application, and that it's a journey. And so what we actually see here at Rackspace is customers making strategic design choices and strategic decisions on when they start to port those applications to the cloud. And what we'll get into a little bit later too, as well, is sometimes we actually pull back those decisions and we kind of leverage more legacy and traditional infrastructure. So I think there's a lot we can talk about. Each one of these panelists has navigated through all of the challenges and been successful leveraging cloud technology. So I think they'll be able to give us some insight right there from the front lines. So just real quickly about Rackspace. What you'll see up here on the slide is a recent Gartner Magic Quadrant that was newly created. One thing at Rackspace that we pride ourselves on is that we're not just a hosting company. We coined a term called fanatical support. And what fanatical support means to us is we want to be known as a service company, just like Nordstrom's and Southwest Airlines are known for the service that they deliver to their customers. We really believe that hosting in general is a commodity market, but expertise around hosting and guidance and having a trusted partner is increasingly more valuable. So this was kind of validated when Gartner released this new Magic Quadrant, naming us the leader, what they call managed cloud hosting or cloud-enabled managed hosting. And this is a totally new quadrant, and the people that you won't see on there are people like the Amazons and Googles of the world that just provide a pure infrastructure play, right? So this kind of talks about a new sector of the business that kind of layers on some of those expertise and support aspects to the cloud. So we're really happy to see that validation from Gartner in this most recent report. And generally what we do see for a majority of customers is that they can utilize a lot of the benefits that cloud hosting gives them. They benefit from the scalability, they can have ephemeral type of workloads that give them a really nice advantage in utility pricing. They can kind of shift their plans as they go without having to really destroy a bunch of CapEx investments that they're making. So specifically for startups, specifically for new applications, the cloud gives them agility and flexibility that allows them to move forward without kind of disrupting the pace of their organization. And so, kind of based off of that, I want to go straight into the questions here. And specifically on our first one, we saw some of the benefits in the cloud right there. And I think that that's not particularly, a very controversial subject. But the cloud has allowed us to kind of scale outside of these paradigms of single server environments, creating entire environments in the cloud, and has allowed us to kind of meet the demands of these really demanding applications. So I'd like to pose the first question to Alex. And actually first, why don't we just have you guys introduce yourself and explain a little bit about what you do and how you guys have leveraged the cloud.
Sure. Hi, I'm Fedosseev. I did presentation yesterday. In my company, OneWorld Online is a solution for engagement and analytics with the mission to get people's opinions around the world of any topic quickly with a high quality, with the ability to conclude something meaningful out of collected data. So imagine different sites in different languages around the world using our modules to ask people questions, engage them in debates, run quizzes, and return back really interesting results. So you can compare yourself to other people and also provide really great analytics for publishers and their partners behind the scenes so they can learn better about the audience and serve them better content, better advertisement, and better roadmaps. So that's what OneWorld is about. And my previous companies also were using cloud solutions before they became as mature and as reliable as today. And I can talk about this during your first question.
So you've seen it all. Great.
Yeah, I've seen the bad and good and the ugly, and especially before they started calling the cloud. There was a very popular abbreviation, NOC, NOC.
Yeah.
Building NOCs was a whole story on its own. Every time building NOC was like a fire drill or some kind of major challenge for the whole company.
You didn't need to sleep back then. It was perfectly fine to wake up at 3 a.m. and drive out there.
Exercise.
Things like exercise. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right.
So I'm Manav, the founder and CEO of Instart project. We are a SaaS company in the application delivery space. And our customers are leading online businesses. So that's like e-commerce, online gaming companies, leading SaaS vendors, travel hospitality companies. And the common theme across all these companies is that their business and their revenue depends on performance. So we work with these companies and we make sure that their sites and their apps load really, really fast as possible for all their users across all devices. And we are disrupting this space of legacy incumbents called content delivery networks, CDNs. This is a space that frankly has seen no innovation in the last decade, and that's what we're changing.
Well, my last startup was acquired by Occupied, so I can understand that. It's a couple of Red Swoosh, it was a peer-to-peer content distribution network. Anyway, my name is David. I'm with a company called Expensify. We do expense reports that don't suck. It's a bold vision, but we're improving the world one expense report at a time.
Excellent. Also the best dressed guy in technology. Glad to have you on the panel. So again, we'd be placating you guys if we, sat here and just pounded on the benefits of cloud. But I think, diving down in the reality and some of the challenges that you're seeing is a little bit more interested, since you guys have been on the front lines of this. And just because I'm OCD and I like repetition, we'll start with you, Alex. So, my question is simply, what are you seeing as common issues users are facing when they aim to scale their efforts externally, deliver content, deliver applications outside of a cloud environment? And how do they do that to mobile and social platforms? What are some of the pain points and obstacles that you see out there in the industry?
Yeah, just to put it in context, like I mentioned, in the previous company back in the early 2000s, we were building cloud solution to supplement smart gateways going to the field. It was a solution for AT&T, and the company was Wire. So we built a remote management platform, which lived in the cloud and was communicating the devices in the field. And scaling was always a big challenge, right? Not only we were rewriting the code many times, but also going through all kind of operational procedures to scale the solution. And thanks God this time is over, and now we're all using these cloud platforms to actually take this burden away from our own operations and our own engineering, and mostly putting it on the shoulders of our partners, hosting platforms. And so nowadays, current company, OneRoad, which is a 3-year-old company, we started from day one, counting on this cloud solution as our infrastructure, and followed their guidelines actually from day one, because Amazon was publishing them, other vendors, of course, they have these guidelines at the very beginning. So you start using them from ground zero, essentially, just follow them, because you really want to leverage best practices. And in our case, imagine that our modules live on many, many published sites. And of course, one thing nobody's going to tolerate, both the partners, the owners of the sites, and the end users, is delays, high latency, or slow loading, or inconsistent experience. So it's really tough, actually, because it could be different factors in the picture. And so, from my point of view, looking from business perspective, the best infrastructure is the one that I don't notice. It just exists on its own, it does the job, and every time I grow my customer base, it just happens, right, magically. Reality is much closer to this today than it used to be in the early 2000s, but it's still not quite there, right? Because you still need to have some dashboarding, some monitoring tools, performance tools, to see what's happening, actually. And this year we're going through the hockey stick growth, including international. So I see this live in the, imagine this, in our office everybody's running Google Analytics, some dashboards against our service. Probably half the companies doing that, because everybody really cares about what's happening. We see this change in traffic between morning and midday, because for example, US is active, then it goes to sleep, South America picking up, and then some point of Asia and Europe, the whole rollout. But also it depends on time of the day and day of the week and so on. So monitoring, I think, is the next big challenge and next big thing that everybody should be really paying attention. Because if we have a good dashboard and good metrics to monitor what's going on, that's why I'm so intrigued with the performance improvements you're making. Because I keep hearing it from my customers all the time. I want your load time to be in milliseconds, not seconds. I want the latency to be that. I want all kind of good things. So it translates to me to make sure that the performance is there, the monitoring tools are enabled, and also geolocations are covered, because when you go from, especially from country to country, that always includes some challenges, like cache servers and so on. And I think overall, Amazon and Fedosseev and other partners we did a good job on this one, but there's still some plenty in the boat, which maybe we'll discuss more about how to achieve this scalability by combining best practices, but also some forward-looking planning.
Well, actually, to jump in there a little bit, I agree. The sort of application, or a global scale application design is sort of, I mean, a relatively new thing in the sense that we had to plan for this sort of binaural sort of distribution of day-night traffic and the shifting, pre-populating caches and this and this other planet and so forth. And I agree. I think that when it comes, I think cloud services are especially good. Like cloud infrastructure is really great if you want to spin up a server in Asia and have to fly there. And so I think that as applications become more global in nature, I think these topics certainly become much more interesting than they have in the past.
Just to double click on what you said, Alex, about kind of the slow user experience. How damaging is it when you're delivering experience to your customer. Maybe that's based on infrastructure, maybe it's application performance. But what does that look like? I imagine that's a pretty pervasive problem.
Yeah, it is, and that's something you have to pay attention from the very beginning, because usually partners want to do trials, do some tests, and you usually go to some hard-to-play environment, let's say not enable the whole site, but a few pages of information to understand what's going on, because there's a big difference between test mode and production mode, right, when we see real traffic, as we all know, but the tolerance is very low. If somebody sees page loading for more than 2 seconds, at least for most of the page loading 2 seconds, that's pretty much a stopper, that's the logical variant, right? Anything beyond that is considered unacceptable. And of course, the challenging part is also diagnose the problem, see where are the delays, why it's happening. So I think that's why performance profiling tools are so important. Because it could be anything. Caching, of course, I agree with David, is a big deal. And a lot of companies trying to optimize it. It's international, global caching. Because that could be the case. Even Amazon, they scale their service in different parts of the world slightly differently, right, as you all know. I'm sure that other companies do the same thing. And maybe kind of looking forward to some of the other questions, that's why it might be really neat to not to put all the eggs in one basket, but have more interesting solution where it knows how to switch from one environment to another, at least for parts of the system, as a backup.
And Manav, I know you deliver that experience to customers, so you probably see when it goes wrong. I imagine they don't take it kindly when you go to Twitter and just blame Amazon.
So this is something we just see all day long, every day. And there's a lot of published third-party data on this from some very reputable sources. So Walmart recently published this report, and that said that for every 100 millisecond delay in their page load, they lost about 1% in incremental. That's what, right? And this problem that you're talking about is actually gets even further compounded and aggravated by the use of mobile devices. Right? So on mobile devices, you're typically on a very on-off type of a wireless network. Caching content all over the world doesn't really help, because it only takes it to the edge. But the real bottleneck is on this 3G, 4G, or Wi-Fi connection that your device is talking on. And on mobile, whether you like it or not, users expect actually a faster experience than on the desktop. Right? So on one hand, it is more limited, but the user expectations are actually higher, and that just really kills a lot of companies that we've seen.
We're demanding creatures when it comes to our mobile.
Everybody is.
So to move on, I wanted to put this up on the screen. This was a tweet that I thought was especially interesting coming out of Microsoft, talking about how their client-server business has grown 19% just over the last year. And when we all entered into this industry, we really believed that it's going to kind of cannibalize the traditional server model. And what we're actually seeing is both technologies continue to grow. So that kind of leads me into my next question. We all sit here and we can kind of articulate the advantages of cloud. But when we would recommend not using cloud, what are some of the use cases and some of the workloads where it still just makes sense to kind of land on either legacy infrastructure or other types of technology? And I want to throw that over to you, David, first.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, I think that actually Alex hit on one, and that is the notion of diversity. And I'd say having high uptime requires just having a variety of fallbacks and so forth, and not having yourself locked into a single provider is key. I'd say being able to have like Amazon or whatever, it's they sound really great, except their performance is good, but their uptime is actually terrible. It's like if you ran your website or whatever service on a single availability zone on Amazon, you'd suffer a lot. But if having multiple providers, be it Amazon and Rackspace, or having dedicated servers, or even better, I'd say sometimes for some services, owning your own service can help. Maybe a second one I would say is, on that second point would be cost. If you have a really predictable and even load, you're not really getting a lot of advantage, the cost advantage of the cloud. Because if you know exactly how much hardware you need, it's better just to buy it, and then you just pay power rather than paying by the hour. And so I'd say maybe diversity, cost, and maybe a third one is probably compliance. Expensify, we do expense reporting, we deal with tons of public companies, we process billions of dollars in transactions. And so as you can imagine, the government's all up in our business, the banks are, and so forth. And so they have a lot of, they're not always the most savvy of creatures out there, I would say. And so if we say that we're hosting on a particular provider, they're like, well, yeah, that provider sounds great because they're not on this list. And this list was made in 1982, and they're just not on it. And it's like, well, I guess, if you want this license, you gotta be on the list, sorry. And so I think that compliance with dealing with a lot of sort of antiquated partners, I think is kind of a big deal. And I think that cloud can can be sort of a hindrance often in the compliance discussion. So I guess I had to pick three. I'd say diversity in order to achieve high uptime, sort of cost when there's predictable load, and then compliance when dealing with agent elders.
Yeah, you brought up a good point there about kind of design to fail. Not everybody can have a chaos monkey software that goes around shutting down whole parts of the data center. So
it's fine. Just transfer money randomly. I'm sure it's going to be good.
Oh yeah, we'll audit it later on. Manav, do you have any comments on David's points?
Yeah, so I guess I have some personal experience with this particular topic. When we started the company, and for us, because the kind of service we provide, we need to have servers deployed in different parts of the world. Everything needs to be fully redundant. Uptime, as David mentioned, is very important for us to provide to our customers. But in our initial version, all of our servers were running in the cloud. All of our backend services were running in the cloud, on top of AWS, Rackspace, and whatnot. And I'm a big believer in cloud future, but ultimately, we ended up taking a lot of these services outside of the cloud. We spun up physical servers, managed them.
Just like us,
yeah. So we started running these services on these servers, set up a whole log team, sort of started really managing all of that. And one of the big reasons for that was we feel that most of the clouds, or any of the clouds today, they don't provide a good enough control on the networking infrastructure, right? So if you want to do something, like let's use the Anycast protocol for doing some nice load balancing or diffusing DDoS type of attacks, there's just no good way to do that. Right? And so those are some key capabilities that are lacking in clouds today that force us to do that.
That's a great point. And kind of rounding things up here, I was able to kind of review everybody's websites, learn more about the businesses, a great experience here. Manav, on your website, I really love a term that's coined there that says relying on intelligent software to solve the most difficult challenges. So my first thought is intelligent software, what does that mean? Does that mean we're closer to Skynet and some of these really scary things that keep me up at night? But that's kind of an interesting concept to me because traditionally we would have infrastructure architecture and we would design applications to play well with that architecture. But now that we have so many standards that span across cloud technology, we have so many things that we can predict, applications are actually starting to influence the underlying cloud architecture and scale it and grow it in a way that's pretty seamless. In your mind, how are applications changing to influence the infrastructure design, and are they causing these older environments to become obsolete?
Yeah, so I guess the answer to the second question is yes. They're causing or going to completely cause the older environments to become obsolete. So the change that we are seeing or we have seen is that earlier you had these applications that you used to run basically a perimeter of servers inside a perimeter, or servers that were inside a perimeter, right? And these applications could scale, and then you surrounded these servers by like a layer of load balancers. And then you surrounded that by like a layer of firewalls and so on and so forth, right? But these applications, they were designed to run on these servers, execute, generate some code, generate some content, which is really static, and push it out to the end users. But now what we are seeing is very personalized, very sophisticated cloud applications, which have a fairly non-trivial sophisticated client-side component, thanks to all the rich browsers and the high capability clients today, right? So what you have now is part of the application that runs on these servers and part of the application that runs within these browsers or on this client. And you have all these services, these application infrastructure type services like your load balancers and your security solutions that work really well for the server side of the server part of the application, but they do nothing for the client side of the application. And that's something that our company actually plays into. We see in the market.
Great. Just wanted to end here with kind of a rapid fire question. We're talking about the evolution of cloud. We've talked about how far we've come. But what's next as we continue to evolve? What are your users excited about? What are your developers excited about? Maybe I'll start off with David. What's the next buzzword, or maybe something a little bit more realistic and executable?
Boy, that's tough, man. I wish I'd thought about this ahead of time. I'm going to pass. I'm going to come back. I'm going to have something amazing in about 30 seconds.
No problem.
So I'll use something non-amazing with more time. So what we think, when we talk to people and talk to our customers and see some things, something interesting which seems to be shaping up is this whole advent of hybrid clouds. And this cloud brokerage type services and the ability to take your workload from one cloud and run it on some other cloud, or have a distributed, really truly distributed application, part of which runs on one cloud, part of which runs on the other cloud, and you can dynamically compose these different cloud services together. And that is super interesting in my mind, because I think that is going to cause a lot of problem for these legacy application infrastructure services, which make this assumption that your applications are running in some contained, isolated part that you can tie a string around. So that's something that we see.
Yeah, from my point of view, it's not really exciting that we have to deal with, but it's something we all collectively should pay a lot of attention for these cloud services to be successful. What I see in my real the engagement, quality, and getting people's opinion is that there's more and more regulation or requirements from some countries, like for example, Eastern Europe and Western Europe, that information about the people should be kept within the country. And it's become really complex because imagine this, if people vote anonymously, that's less of a problem. Or if they use their Facebook login account or Twitter or Google Plus to register and vote on certain issues. And then it's become really blurry, right? Because you can have part of information in one country, the other part in another country. And trying to build a system that takes into consideration all these restrictions, but still usable, delivers the value and so on, it's very challenging. So I think in addition to diversity, which we discussed a little bit, we should really think about the security, partition of data, access to data, the way that not only the customers are happy, but we comply with these regulations or have at least a good story to negotiate around these things based on specific services. I see that a challenge for the global applications like ours that collects data around the world, because some countries are really easy to deal with and some countries are either already difficult or becoming difficult. So that's a big concern of mine. Because if you really want to have a global solution, you really need to take that into consideration.
Data governance and such seems to be a really hot topic, and I think that it's interesting when ethics and morality start coming to that. We're actually kind of bringing it down to a human level. You also said analytics earlier, so I imagine that's part of it as well.
That's right.
So data's the new oil, as they say.
And I guess for my amazing answer, which was probably a little bit oversold, I actually don't know that there's a next big thing. There's not always a next big thing, I guess I would say. And I think the next big thing is going to be, we're just filling in the gaps more and more. And I think that these services become so reliable and so ubiquitous that they become like utility power. And that we're still not to that point. Like we trust that the power is like almost always on in this country. It's like it's always great. The internet is usually on. And it's like, yeah, it's with high reliability it's on. And then the website's on the internet, it's like, yeah, they're sometimes on. Like, it's great. And I think that we're still kind of building that up from the bottom. It's like you have to have really awesome power way too. And like the internet's getting to a point where it's like, yeah, it's always there, it's always on my phone. And like the data, it knows everything about me and so forth. I think like the future is going to be more things like Google Map. It's going to be applications that fall into the background. Like I would say one of our dreams for Expensify is because expense reporting, let's be honest, is like we don't suck, but it's still not fun. It's like, hey, everyone hates their expense reports. There's no way to get around that. And so our dream for Expensify is that we're the product that you never ever use. That you set it up once, and then we just take care of everything for you. Just take a picture, we'll just do everything else for you. So I think that like our design ethos is we want you to come to our product as infrequently as necessary and leave as fast as possible. And I think that over time, that sort of design ethos is going to be for everyone, where it's not about something new, it's about basically just getting out of the way. Always being there, being so reliable that everyone just forgets it's even there. And I think that's the next big thing.
Please make that happen for us.
I'm working on it.
So great panel today. I want to thank you guys. Great conversation. I want to kind of open it up now to any questions from the audience. I think we have some microphones floating around. Specifically for our panelists, guys, you tap into the wealth of knowledge that these guys bring to the table.
I think it was, this is Cyril Ryan from Now. I think it was mentioned that things like load balancing and other things are not really mature on the cloud environment. Can you throw some more light on that?
So what I said was that as applications start running across different cloud services, then there are basic principles that load balancers work against, which are not going to be that sufficient, right? So when you do load balancing across clouds today, you typically use some sort of a DNS-based load balancer, right? And that's generally not as reliable, it's not as fast to respond, and it doesn't really have that same reliability or enterprise-grade readiness to it that your typical EDC does, right? So that's an example of services that are basically stretching for the kind of deployment models you have today and not ready for scale. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
He's going to get his Nike fuel today.
Hi. In my company, when we started out, we were using managed hosting, and then we moved into cloud provider, public cloud provider. And what started happening was our costs started skyrocketing basically because the nodes I wanted to create for dev far exceeded what I was using in production. So I went into a study to figure out, well, where's the cost going? What am I really paying for with a public cloud provider? And what I kind of came to the conclusion was that I'm paying not only a managed hosting fee, but I'm also paying additional fat on top of that. And if you think about virtualization and the creation of cloud, it's really because CPUs and RAM has gotten so cheap that it's, it can power these things. There's so much extra CPU power out there. So, so I did some quick analysis, and I'm thinking, well, cloud providers aren't buying the fastest drives on the planet. They're not buying the fastest CPUs. They're not buying the fastest RAM. Plus, I'm thrown into a box that's probably oversubscribed with voice and equal problems and everything else. So I went out and I spec'd my own hardware. And in a day when you can buy a box with 256 gigs of RAM, 24 cores running 3.5 gigahertz, you get a tremendous amount of power out of that. So I guess all wisdom, I now run my own cage, my own rack, and it was 10 months of cost of paying what I was paying to buy all my own hardware. And application stability has gone up. I have total control over everything, and I kind of wonder, am I doing something wrong? I mean, I was not using Amazon, so I realized there's other controls Kubernetes put in there, but I still run my own virtualization. I run my own dev boxes, so I can have an infinite number of dev is not about production, just screens. And because the cost is so low now, so while cloud costs are going up, hardware costs it's racing to zero. So for me, the solution is build my own private cloud. But use fully optimized hardware, vertically, down to the metal, putting every single component, and I now have total control. So was I just working with the wrong partners before, or do you guys think because nobody ever talks about the cost of the cloud. Yeah, sure, it's convenient. Push a button, I get more nodes, I get them spun up anywhere in the planet. But what are you really paying for? What is 8 gigs of application space really mean? I'm used to FOPS. I'm used to throughput. I'm used to gigabits per second processing, not a memory footprint. So that's just my experience. I just kind of wanted a reaction.
You, sir, are not alone. So if you look at heavily regulated industries specifically, they can't leverage the public cloud just for the kind of multi-tenancy of that. So I'd say that once the cloud cleared of kind of hype around these technologies, then we get to the reality of that. I think a lot of users are seeing the same. Do you guys have any comments on that? We didn't really touch on price, which I think is...
Yeah, well, I would say in a situation where you can provision hardware and you're willing to pay for that hardware 24/7, I think that owning your own hardware is great. I think a situation where it's not good, like we process millions and millions of receipts all the time, and they come in spikes. Like April 15th is like a rough day, and so so therefore, but we don't always want to pay for like April 15th hardware on every other day of the year. And so I think that having the ability to scale up and down is great. And so I think cloud is really awesome for situations where you have unpredictable demand, because then the cost advantage of your own hardware actually kind of goes away. And so I think that's like the main thing.
Yeah, no, I would just second that. I think utilization is a very important thing to factor in when considering the economies of running some workload on the cloud or buying your own servers. That I guess together with cash flow, those are the two important things. And, it may make a different kind of a sense in different kind of a situation as to what you decide to do with that.
Yeah, for me, very simple comment. And you only can compare when things go right and things go wrong. And that's how you measure everything. Because when things go right, of course, it's much cheaper and better. But what if things go wrong? Whose time is going to be assigned to troubleshoot and solve the problem? Because that's, I think, is the key for reliable hosting.
I can't think of a better place to end. It's a great last sentiment there. So I want to thank my panel today. Great job, guys. Thank you all for listening.